Good evening, everyone. This is Reading for Charity again. Currently reading for the Archie Foundation. Today, the review we're going to be doing is Winkie. Should a bit better. A very, very odd book, which we'll come on to in a second. So, the charity we're reading for this time round is the Archie Foundation. And as I do at the start of every single video, I'll just say a little bit about it. It's a fantastic charity. It works predominantly in the northeast of Scotland. It's helping kids who have to be in hospital have a bit of an easier time of it. If you've ever been in hospital as an adult, you know that, for example, going into theatre is a terrifying experience. Everything is so cold and clinical and sterile. It's stainless steel everywhere. Everyone's looks like, the stereotypical scary gowns, scary masks. It's a terrifying experience for an adult, and just imagine what it must be like as a child going in there, perhaps repeatedly. It's a horrifying thing. So anything that can make the lives of these kids a bit easier, who have to be in hospital, have to go into surgery, I think is a fantastic thing to support, and that's what we're currently supporting. The Just Giving link and the Facebook feed for this are going to be in the description of the video, and it's in the description of the page. If you've donated already, thank you very much. Feel free to donate again. If you've never donated before, what's stopping you? Again, it's coming up for payday soon, so if you've got a couple of quid in your pocket, jump on the Just Giving link and fire it their way. It's a really, really good charity to support. So, the book, Winkie. This is a curious book. I'll start off by saying that I got accused of trying to read more into this book than actually existed by the person who actually made the donation for it. So I think it's not the unbearable lightness of being. It's not the deep work of transformative fiction that I think that I was trying to find something into this. Which is curious because it feels like it should be. It's a curious statement to make. My first problem with the book, my main problem with the book, is actually what it says in the front, and it's not the same blurb that it has on the screen. The cover of my one is subtly different, which I will, as close to the camera as I can make it. Yeah, there we go. If you can read that, the most extraordinary and most inventive satire on the war on terror to emerge from America. So, we're expecting this book to be first satirical, and secondly, all about the war in America, the war on terror, and how that's going to go. So it's an interesting. I've just realised I've completely knocked out the white balance by putting that up close. Oh, you're going to be red for the rest of this video. Where was I? Technical things. So you kind of expect this to be a satire on the war on terror and how America handles it or doesn't handle it, as the case may be. And maybe 10% of the book is to do actually with the war on terror, and the rest of the 90% is nothing to do with the war on terror. So going into this book, straight away I had a false impression of what the book was going to be like. And the book opens with... That'd be more my mobile. And the book actually opens with the start of the court case against Winkie. And this book was written in 2006, so we have 11 years worth of ridiculousness on the war on terror on top of when this book was written. And it was published, I think, in 2006, the first edition. So this was probably written even earlier than that. So, if it's copyright's 2006, this was probably written more like 2004, 2003, sort of straight after, kind of 2011 when everything kicked off. 2011. 9/11. Apologies to all Americans. And when everything kicked off. So, when this book was written, the biting satire of this book was probably quite relevant and probably quite accurate. However, with the years that we've had on top of this book doesn't actually probably scratch the surface of the reality of being behind bars in American prisons, full stop. Not even for the war on terror, but just to being an American prisoner. I mean, the way that, for example, the Black Lives Movement people are treated in prison, I think would be fairly, if they were given this book to read, they would look at it and go, well, that's actually fairly reminiscent of the treatment I've received. And the only way that this kind of descends from satire is into sheer absurdism. It stops being satirical. The moment the prosecutor starts laying on charges of, inappropriate behaviour with Victorian English boys and converting the youth in Greece, before Christ was born, that it stops being satire at that point. It becomes absurd, and I think that's closer to the tone of the book than the satire it suggests it should be. I should really talk about the other 90% of the book. The other 90% of the book is basically Winkie's backstory. It's Winkie when he was still a toy, when he was immobile, when he was loved and discarded by children repeatedly over the years. And this is kind of ground that we've seen with Toy Story. If you've ever watched the Toy Story films, particularly the third one, none of this is particularly feels like inventive ground. Again, I think time hasn't been, and popular culture hasn't been kind to this book. I think if it hadn't been for the Toy Story films, this would be a much more exciting and interesting book. But the whole chunk about the toy coming to life and his pain at being discarded by children who have become adults, I think is probably better done by Pixar in the Toy Story films than this book manages. That's not to say it's done badly. It's not. It's done very, very well. But I think Pixar hits the correct notes better than Winkie does, than Clifford Chase manages in Winkie. The rest of the book is about once he gains his independence, once he becomes essentially alive. And the next chunk of book is a little bit of a meditation on what it means to be alive and what not just through the eyes of Winkie, what it means to be human. And I think this is the weakest point of the entire book. This is the bit that feels like there's trying to be a message made by Clifford Chase, and this is the bit I got accused of trying to look too much into actually what Clifford meant. I think the words that were written to me by the donor were, don't look into something that's not there, it's just a nice book about a bear who's alive. A teddy bear who's alive. And yeah, okay, I think that's probably true, and I think that's definitely the outcome of the book. I'm not entirely sure that's what Clifford Chase meant when he wrote it. I think there is a little bit of meditation on what it means to be human. The way that Winkie feels, and the way that his love of the little bear that he creates, and the way it's cruelly taken away from him, I think is all kind of perhaps mirrored by the way that a child who's grown to an adult who has his toy taken away from him might be. I think he's trying to set up the symmetry. And again, I'm going to get accused of trying to read too much into this book that's not there. But it feels that this is the shape of what he's trying to do, and I don't think that it perhaps ever quite gets there. Again, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm not. So we're kind of left with a slightly disappointing... I felt a slightly disappointed book overall. I enjoyed it, but all its constituent parts I think have been done better elsewhere, or haven't stood up to the test of time. The court scene segments, which are absurd rather than satire, I think, of the US system, I think have been... anyone who's played kind of any form of game involving prison system or being incarcerated, computer game, role-playing game, board game, whatever, I think has, in the last 10 years, has seen the elements of satire and absurdity that Clifford Chase is trying to grab in the book. So it's not maybe as hard-hitting when the prosecutor starts going off the flights of fancy. The main policeman who's hunted down Winkie and has basically just lost his rag when it happens, and imagining all these crimes that Winkie could have committed and starts tying him to everything, is actually, I think, done better by a book that we'll be reviewing later on. I'm not going to give away which one it is, but I think the way that he's been written, again, disappointing when I come to think about it, because it's been done better elsewhere. it's a good book, and all the bits kind of go together, but you feel like they're bits. It feels a little bit like it's been writing by writing group. It feels like it's been honed in surgical precision to try and get to where it is. All the extraneous parts ripped out by constant going over by other people. It feels a little bit like that. I think there's little in the way of stylistic tone. There's little in the way of kind of flourishes or flair. It's very mechanistic, I think, the way I would describe the book. It's good. It's an interesting read. It definitely is an interesting read. Again, I think there's opportunities missed in the book, and this is becoming a recurring theme in a lot of the books I've read. I think there's opportunities missed in the book to actually have a proper discussion about some of the elements in the war in America, when not giving away the ending, but at the end there's rather than tying it up in a bow, I think it would have been better for one of those ambiguous endings. I love an ambiguous ending to a book, where if Winkie's experiences in the US legal system had actually driven him to become what they feared, I think that would have been a better example of and a better satire of the US legal system than actually what we got. Again, not describing what we've got, but the ending is very much more on the personal note for Winkie than the absurdist satirical section of the book, which feels very, very much out of place. It feels like that was what the book was sold on, but it's only 10% of the book, and the rest of the book isn't what it was sold on. I suspect there was a publisher who got this book and went, yes, this is the legal satire book that we were waiting for. This is fantastic. It's going to be fantastic. Sits down reading it and goes, what the hell is this? I suspect that's what it's going to... I think that's probably how that conversation went. There was an element I was going to say about the way that he uses the absurdity. Winkie is completely silent pretty much through the entirety of the book. He only gives a rousing speech at the end, but he emotes a lot and he expresses a lot. And I think the fact he's supposed to be mute through the book is, again, talking about repression, and there's a little bit of where Winkie and Clifford Chase, I think, kind of maybe meet each other a little bit. Clifford Chase, the blurb at the back, actually, which I'll say. Clifford Chase, yada yada yada. He lives in Brooklyn, New York, where he wrote Winkie's first novel. The original bear is the author's own, is over 80 and a bit mangy. So the original bear, that would be Winkie, is his grandmother's bear. So this kind of immediately becomes less of a story about a cute bear who gains sentience and goes through the US legal system, then it becomes a little bit of a love story to his grandmother's bear. So the bit of the story where it's being passed from Ruth down through the children, eventually with Clifford, feels less novelistic and more probably real life, and Clifford Chase imagining how Winkie would have felt going through all those children, and you suddenly understand that this has got really very little to do with actually trying to make a point, which is what I've been accused of trying to find, and it is just a love story to his grandmother's bear, his old bear, which is slightly freaky for a middle-aged man to be doing, but whatever sells books. I'm going to read a small section from it, which I think is the best bit of the legal bit. It's the only bit that actually I think is approaches the humour that he's looking for, that's maybe missing in the rest of the book. Where we go. So this is under cross-examination of one of the defence witnesses. And are you familiar, continued the prosecutor, scarcely missing a beat, with the many and various genetic defects and mutations, such as extreme dwarfism, hermaphroditism, and other far more ghastly phenomena as cloth-like skin, the complete absence of internal organs, and eyeballs as hard as glass? Mrs. Brackle adjusted her teddy bear scarf. No. And have you studied chromosomal damage and other ill effects of the legal use of drugs such as LSD, ecstasy, coke, crack, heroin, or methamphetamines? No. Well then, how about the latest breakthroughs in plastic and reconstructive surgery and how those breakthroughs might be adapted by unscrupulous physicians for criminal purposes? No. Ritual sacrifice and other appearance-altering rites? No. And can you identify the horrible disfiguring effects of certain rare infectious agents, including and especially sexually transmitted diseases, which are all too prevalent in the various remote regions around the globe? Mrs. Brackle's hands fluttered nervously. Oh my, no. Or the horrible disfiguring effects of exposure to radiation or chemical or biological weapons, effects that can go beyond the average person's wildest imagination? No. The prosecutor sighed loudly. Mrs. Brackle, do you have any scientific or medical experience of any kind? The witness cleared her throat. No, but I am most certainly an expert on teddy bears. No further questions. It's actually a very, very good bit of the book. It's the way that it's the good old 90s legal dramas that everyone enjoyed watching. You know, the line of questioning by the prosecutor where he just kind of destroys the witness, but to the extent where it becomes absurd. She's up on the stand as a teddy bear expert. Winkie is of course a teddy bear, and he leads the questioning that it could be any number of these things, but it's a very entertaining way, and it's very entertainingly written, the way it's just been done. And he obviously watched a lot of the legal dramas when he did it, but it's an enjoyable part of the book. So to sum up this book, it's an odd book. It's a very, very odd book. 10% of it is court case and people being completely insane, which I would assume, having never gone through it, the US legal system is. I mean, certainly we hear enough about it in social media. 90% of the book is a love story to Clifford Chase's childhood bear, which was originally owned by his grandmother. And those bits are sweet and nice and a little bit weird, but it has no deeper meaning, I think, than simply just a little love story to his grandmother's bear. It's a nice book. By all means read it. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't. Unlike some of the other books, I'm not suggesting you shouldn't read this book. It's a good book, but don't go into it expecting the fantastic satire that you would be expecting. Yeah, I think that's that's what I'm going to leave that one at. So next week, yes, because it's Sunday. Next Wednesday we'll be reviewing Wilt by Tom Sharp, and we'll see how that one goes. Actually got slightly similar parallels to Winkie, purely by accident again, but this is turning into a bit of a thing where successive books, have run across similar themes. So again, thank you very much for listening, or watching and listening if you're using all your senses. Nobody in the chat again. It's a shame. It would be nice to have people in the chat just to have a little argument about the book or discussion about the book if you've read it before. Ask any questions about it that I might not have covered in the review. So please, if you want to come along and get in the chat and have a few words, that's fantastic. Please do so. That'd be great. Otherwise, we're raising money for the Archie Foundation for this run of Reading for Charity. Fantastic charity. Helps sick kids in the northeast of Scotland who have got to be in hospital through no fault of their own. It's a fantastic charity to support. I will put the links to the Just Giving page and the Facebook page for all this in the description of the video again. These are all going up on YouTube as well, so that's going to be their permanent archive. So once this is up, it'll be on YouTube and available as well. I think that's everything. It will be Wednesday for the next review. Thank you very much for your time. Good evening.